Have you ever been in the middle of a discussion? Maybe a heated debate with a friend? Maybe just watching two politicians go at it on TV? And you get this distinct feeling in your gut that something is deeply wrong? The person speaking sounds confident. They sound persuasive. Their argument seems to make sense on the surface, but you can't shake the feeling that you're being tricked. It's like watching a magician perform a sleight of hand. You know the coin didn't really vanish, but you can't for the life of you figure out how they did it. You can't pinpoint the exact moment of the deception. Have you ever tried to make a point online only to have someone twist your words into something so absurd and unrecognizable that you don't even know how to respond? You say something simple like, "I think cities should have more bike lanes." And suddenly, you're being accused of wanting to forcibly confiscate everyone's cars. How did we get from A to Z? What happened to the conversation? What if I told you that these verbal tricks, these intellectual sleights of hand, are not random? What if I told you they are well-known techniques with specific names, predictable patterns, and identifiable weaknesses? They are a kind of dark art of persuasion. A set of logical traps designed to shut down debate, appeal to our worst instincts, and make us agree with something even when it makes no logical sense. They are called logical fallacies. And in this episode, my friends, we are going to become fallacy hunters. We're pulling back the curtain on these dark arts and shining a bright light on them. We're going to name these verbal traps, dissect them to see how they work, and look at real-world examples you see every single day. By the end of our time today, you won't just feel when an argument is weak, you'll know exactly why it is weak. You'll have the language to identify it, articulate it, and defend your own mind against it. This is your first lesson in intellectual Jiu-Jitsu. I'm Danny, and this is a new episode from English Plus Podcast. In our last episode, we talked about logic as the blueprint for a good argument. A logical argument is like a well-built house. It has a solid foundation of evidence, strong structural support of reasoning, and all the pieces connect in a way that is sound and stable. A logical fallacy, on the other hand, is a defect in that reasoning. It is an argument that looks like a house from a distance, but when you get up close, you realize it's just a cardboard cutout. It's designed to give the illusion of a solid argument, but it has no real substance. The crazy thing is, these fallacies are incredibly effective. They are everywhere. In advertising, in political speeches, in news commentary, and all over your social media feed. But why? Why do these broken arguments work so well on us? It really comes down to a fundamental quirk of human psychology. Our brains are incredibly powerful, but they are also incredibly lazy. Our brain's default setting is to conserve energy. Thinking deeply, analyzing evidence, and evaluating logical structures, that's hard work. It burns calories. So our brains have developed a whole suite of mental shortcuts, which we talked about a lot in our Cognitive Biases week. But today we're going to talk about logical fallacies. Logical fallacies are like a super highway for these shortcuts. They bypass the difficult, analytical part of our brain and appeal directly to the easier, faster, and more emotional parts. There are three main reasons these faulty arguments get a foothold in our minds. First, they prey on our desire for cognitive ease. A simple, snappy, fallacious argument is much easier to process than a complex, nuanced, logical one. It feels right because it's easy. Second, they hijack our emotions. Fallacies are masters of appealing to our fear, our anger, our pity, and our sense of belonging to a tribe. An argument that makes you feel something powerful often seems more convincing than a dry, factual one, even if it's logically bankrupt. And third, they tap into our sense of tribalism. Many fallacies work by drawing a sharp line between us and them. They flatter our own group while demonizing the other, making us feel smart and righteous for agreeing. Now, you can think of logical fallacies as counterfeit money. At a quick glance, a fake $100 bill might look real. You might even be able to pass it off in a dimly lit room. But the moment an expert, someone who knows what to look for, examines it, it falls apart. It has no real value. Today, my friends, we're going to become those experts. We're going to learn how to spot the fakes. To keep things organized, we'll group them in a couple of categories. Let's start with the most common and perhaps the most infuriating group, the fallacies of distraction. That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. These fallacies are the ultimate intellectual escape artists. Their goal isn't to win the argument on its merits. It's to change the argument into something else entirely. They are all about diverting your attention away from the real issue. First up, the heavyweight champion of political debates and online arguments, the straw man. The straw man fallacy is the art of misrepresenting your opponent's argument to make it easier to attack. Instead of engaging with their actual position, you invent a weaker, distorted, or completely fabricated version of their position, a man made of straw, and then you triumphantly knock it down. It's so much easier, after all, to fight a scarecrow than a real person. You see this everywhere. Let's say person A, a city planner, makes a very reasonable argument. This person says, based on our traffic studies, I believe we should invest more in our public transportation system to reduce congestion and improve air quality. A politician, person B, responds in a debate and says, so my opponent is telling you he wants to wage a war on cars. He wants to ban you from driving your own vehicle, force you and your family onto crowded, inconvenient buses, and completely destroy the personal freedom that is the bedrock of our nation. I, for one, will not stand for this outrageous attack on our way of life. See what happened? The original moderate argument about investing more in public transit was twisted into a cartoonishly evil plan to ban all cars and destroy freedom. Person B didn't address the actual argument about traffic or air quality at all. He built a straw man, set it on fire, and then presented himself as the hero for putting it out. When you see this happen, your spidey sense should be tingling. The moment someone starts describing their opponent's position in a way that sounds absurdly evil or stupid, they are probably building a straw man. Next on our list is the laziest and perhaps the most toxic of all the fallacies, the ad hominem. Ad hominem is Latin for to the person. This fallacy occurs when you abandon the argument entirely and instead attack the character, motive, or some other attribute of the person making the argument. It's a complete pivot from the issue to the individual. Now, let's say a scientist, say Dr. Evans, publishes a peer-reviewed study on the effects of a certain chemical on the environment. The study concludes that the chemical is harmful. A spokesperson for the company that produces that chemical responds in a press conference. And this person says, well, before you listen to Dr. Evans, you should know that her research is funded by a grant that comes from a foundation with a known environmentalist agenda. Furthermore, we have information that she received a C in a graduate-level chemistry class 20 years ago and is currently going through a messy divorce. Can you really trust the work of someone with such a biased agenda and a chaotic personal life? Notice that the spokesperson didn't mention a single thing about the study's methodology, its data, or its conclusions. They didn't engage with the argument at all. Instead, they attacked Dr. Evans' funding, implying bias, her academic record, implying incompetence, and even her personal life, implying instability. This is a classic ad hominem. It's a sleazy attempt to discredit the argument by discrediting the person making it. The quality of a chef's soup has nothing to do with the color of their hat, and the validity of a scientific study has nothing to do with a scientist's marital status. But these things happen every day and a lot more than you think. But that's not everything. The third member of our distraction trio is the master of misdirection, the red herring. Now, this one gets its name from an old story about criminals using a strong-smelling smoked fish, a red herring, to distract hunting dogs from the trail of a fox they were chasing. In an argument, a red herring is an irrelevant topic or a side issue that is introduced to divert attention away from the original topic. It's a change of subject, pure and simple. Imagine a journalist is interviewing a CEO whose company is facing accusations of paying its overseas workers unlivable wages. The journalist asks, "Mr. CEO, how do you respond to the reports that your factory workers are being paid less than $1 an hour?" The CEO might respond with a very serious and concerned tone, "Thank you for that question. It brings up the important issue of global economic development. What people often forget is how much good our company does. In fact, just last year, our corporate foundation built 3 schools in the very regions we operate in, and we funded a major philanthropic initiative to bring clean water to thousands of people. We are deeply committed to being a force for good in the world." That sounds lovely, doesn't it? He sounds like a great guy running a great company. But did he answer the question about the $1 an hour wages? Not even close. He threw out a red herring, his company's philanthropy, to distract from the original, uncomfortable question about worker exploitation. It's an incredibly common tactic used by people in power when they want to dodge accountability. Now, of course, there are a lot of other logical fallacies. I'm just giving you an introduction. By all means, search for them and learn more about them. But we talked about strawman, ad hominem, and red herring, the 3 horsemen of argumentative distraction. And they all share one goal: to avoid engaging with the actual issue at hand. Once you learn to spot them, you'll start seeing them everywhere, and they will lose all their power over you, just like a magic trick once learned. But my friends, that's just the first part. Next, we're going to move to our fallacy field guide, part 2, the logic that isn't. That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. Our next group of fallacies is a bit more subtle. These arguments don't always try to change the subject. Instead, they try to connect premises to conclusions using what looks like logic, but is actually deeply flawed. The reasoning itself is weak or invalid. Now let's call them fallacies of weak induction. Now, leading the pack is a favorite of fear-mongers everywhere: the slippery slope. The slippery slope fallacy argues that a small, seemingly harmless first step will inevitably trigger a massive, unstoppable chain reaction of events that will lead to some catastrophic outcome. The argument is that if we allow A to happen, then B, C, D, and eventually the horrifying Z will surely follow. The problem with this fallacy is that it fails to provide any evidence that the chain reaction is inevitable. It just asserts it, usually by playing on our fears. For example, a parent might argue with their teenager and say, "You want to go to a rock concert? Absolutely not. If I let you go to the concert, you'll start staying out late all the time. If you start staying out late, your grades will drop. If your grades drop, you won't get into a good college. If you don't get into a good college, you won't get a good job and you'll end up living on the street. Therefore, I can't let you go to this concert." Now, is it possible that going to a concert could lead to living on the street? Well, I suppose in some bizarre 1 in a billion scenario, maybe. But is it inevitable? Of course not. The argument presents this extreme chain of events as a certainty without any proof. Now, you'll hear this fallacy used to argue against all sorts of policy changes. If we allow the government to regulate this one industry, soon it will regulate all industries, and we'll descend into totalitarian communism. The key to dismantling a slippery slope is to challenge the alleged inevitability of the chain. Now, ask for the evidence that B must follow A and that C must follow B. The argument will usually fall apart very quickly. So that's about the slippery slope. Next, we have the foundation of almost all prejudice and stereotyping: the hasty generalization. Now, this is exactly what it sounds like. It's the fallacy of drawing a broad, sweeping conclusion based on an extremely small or unrepresentative sample of evidence. It's jumping to a conclusion without enough data. If you visit a new city and the first person you meet is rude, and you conclude everyone in this city is rude, you've made a hasty generalization. If you buy a phone from a certain brand and it breaks, and you declare all phones from that brand are garbage, you've made a hasty generalization. This fallacy is the engine of stereotyping. It takes the actions of a few individuals from a group and projects them onto the entire group. It's lazy, it's unfair, and it leads to terrible judgments. The cure for this fallacy is simple: demand more data. A good critical thinker is always asking, is the sample size large enough to justify this conclusion? Is this sample representative of the whole group? So that's the hasty generalization, my friends. Finally, let's look at a fallacy that is the source of countless superstitions and a lot of bad science: the false cause. Also known by its fancy Latin name, post hoc ergo propter hoc. Now, this translates to after this, therefore because of this. It's the fallacy of assuming that because event B happened after event A, then event A must have caused event B. But this is one of the most common errors in human reasoning. Our brains are wired to see patterns and causes, even where none exist. Now, the classic example is the rooster who crows every morning and shortly after the sun rises. Now, the rooster could easily conclude that its crowing causes the sun to rise. Now, the two events are correlated, but there's absolutely no causation. You see this all the time in the world of health and wellness. Someone says, "I was feeling sick, so I started drinking this special crystal-infused water. 2 days later, I felt great. The crystal water cured me." Did it? Or would they have gotten better in 2 days anyway, as their body's immune system did its job? Without a proper scientific study, it's impossible to say. They are confusing correlation with causation. This fallacy is why we need things like placebo-controlled trials to determine if a treatment actually works. We need to prove that the recovery wasn't just something that happened after the treatment, but happened because of it. Always be wary when someone presents a simple cause and effect story. The world is often much more complicated than that. So, my friends, we have our field guide. We've identified some of the most common fallacies that get thrown at us. But what do you do when you spot one in the wild? Shouting, "Aha, that's a straw man," might feel satisfying, but it's not always the most productive way to continue a conversation. It can make you sound pedantic and shut the other person down. The goal isn't just to label the fallacies. It's to use your knowledge to gently deconstruct the flawed argument and guide the conversation back to a more logical path. It's about being a builder, not a demolisher. So if someone uses a straw man against you, instead of shouting the name of the fallacy, you might calmly say, "I think that might be a misrepresentation of my point. What I was actually arguing is this." And then you restate your original position clearly. If someone hits you with an ad hominem, you can create a boundary by saying, "I'm happy to discuss the merits of my argument, but my personal life or background isn't relevant to the facts we're discussing. Can we please stick to the topic?" If you spot a slippery slope, you can question the supposed chain of events. You can say, for example, "I understand your concern about that outcome, but can you help me understand why you think the first step will inevitably lead to the last one? Is it possible that we could stop at the first step?" My friends, simply having the vocabulary for these fallacies is incredibly empowering. It takes that vague, uneasy feeling that an argument is wrong and makes it specific and concrete. It helps you organize your own thoughts and articulate your objections with precision and confidence. This isn't about being argumentative or winning every debate. In fact, it's about the opposite. It's about raising the quality of your own thinking and the quality of your conversations with others. It's a tool for pursuing truth, not just for achieving victory. It's a foundational skill for clear communication and for building a more rational, understanding world, one conversation at a time. Well, you've now been armed with the basics of intellectual self-defense. Use your new powers wisely. All right, we've been on the defensive today. We've learned how to build a fortress for our minds, how to identify the verbal traps, the counterfeit logic, and the rhetorical tricks that are designed to mislead us. You now have your fallacy detection kit, and you know how to deconstruct a bad argument when you see one. But what about being more proactive? What about going on the offensive? Not against people, but against difficult problems. What if there were specific, repeatable techniques and mental models that you could use every single day to solve challenges more effectively, generate more creative ideas, and make better, more informed decisions? Next time, we're moving from the defensive line to the offensive line. We're opening up the critical thinking toolkit. We're going to explore powerful frameworks like the 5 Whys method that Toyota used to revolutionize modern manufacturing, the mind-bending first principles thinking used by innovators like Elon Musk to build rockets from scratch, and other practical tools you can apply at work, at school, and in your life. It's time to stop just analyzing the world and start building better solutions. You're not going to want to miss that. And with that, we come to the end of our episode for today. Thank you very much for listening. Remember, if you want to support English Plus and support me to continue creating for our community, you can do that by subscribing on Apple Podcasts or on Patreon. You can find the links in the description of the episode. Thank you very much for listening. That was another episode from our theme for this week, critical thinking. Remember, never stop learning with English Plus Podcast. I'll see you again next time.